We went over to the embassy, couldn't even get a meeting, and I'll never forget this. It was her birthday that day, and a birthday cake was out, on the sidewalk. Candles were lit. We all sang happy birthday to his little daughter, Melissa, halfway around the world. The insensitivity was mind-boggling on the part of the Japanese government, and you talked about sensitivity. Here's a man being deprived access to his daughter, and really, custody ought to be given. And the abducting case, as we all know, Michael Elias's, absolute fraud seems to have been perpetrated, duplicate set of passports created, and of course Toland and all the others, many of whom are here. I hope the Japanese government gets that. This is not going away. It's only going to get worse in terms of congressional scrutiny. 2 weeks ago, a group of parliamentarians were here from the Diet, and they asked that we withhold food aid to North Korea because of what? Abductions. And I'm with them on the issue of abductions, whether or not food aid is the proper way because of starvation that is massive in North Korea, whether or not that's a way of, I would argue it's not, but still their point about abductions, I agree 1,000%. Well, apply that equally to American left-behind parents. Let me ask a very specific question, two-part, and then I'll yield to Mr. Payne for any questions he might have, and then Mr. Frank. You point out that among the reasons that the court could reject a petition, this is Japan, of course, and to Dr. Campbell, to you, would be, and I guess it's based on Article 13b of the treaty, the taking parent has been abused or is likely to be further abused. I hope that we're insisting in our bilateral with them that this better be evidence-based and not just the mere assertion. Secondly,
of course.
I'm sure you are, but if you could just articulate, that would be helpful. Secondly, the taking parent faces criminal prosecution, and I know that very seldom is our prosecutions, and you might want to speak to this. The International Parental Kidnapping Crime Act does allow for prosecutions, but they are rarely done, and maybe you might want to speak to how often they are done, because it would be very helpful to know that, and for Hague countries, it is not done. But these are pre-Hague. And then the taking parent cannot meet the financial cost of living in another country. Seems to me that is like a loophole that you could drive a Mack truck through. You could say, I can't buy a ticket, or the taking parent, or it may cost too much, and that becomes an opt-out. That would be rife with exploitation on the part of the taking parent if they were to be able to assert that. So I hope we're pushing back, and please speak to that. And finally, if you would, Dr. Campbell, if you could speak to the issue of a sidebar bilateral agreement and a MOU, which, again, this committee went on record recently as last week calling for that. I hope that we do it on the full floor of the House. It seems that there may be no other way. I know your intentions are absolutely pristine and good, that maybe the atmosphere may open up the possibility, but I think the day that ascension occurs becomes a day that the left-behind parents, whatever that number is on that day, is a day of mourning, because it is more likely that the door just slammed right in their face. So if you could speak to that as well.
Thank you for all those questions, and we'll try to address them. In our discussions with the Japanese after they announced their intention to ratify the Hague Convention, we talked to them very specifically about taking reservations under Section 13b, which deals with domestic violence. And it was, I met with them, they sent a delegation to the Special Commission of the Hague in June, and we had a side meeting with them about this and said, how are you going to determine? And they said there would be a separate judicial hearing to talk about domestic violence before the Hague return hearing was held. And we made the point that there have to be provisions for the left-behind parent to be able to represent him or herself at those hearings, and they agreed to that. I think that there'll have to be significant changes in Japanese law. We just had one of our Hague attorneys visiting in Japan, doing training with them, and he made those same points, and they seem to understand it. So I'm hoping that all of these things the efforts that we're making in training and discussions with them will make a difference and make the exceptions that they take livable. Now, many countries take exceptions to certain parts of the convention, as we did on providing free judicial assistance. And so we just have to make sure that the form of these reservations that they're taking doesn't interfere with the real intent of the treaty, which is to get the children back to the United States.
What about the other two provisions?
Now, the other, on the criminal aspect of it, the Hague Convention does envision civil remedies. And I think that if there is a return, I mean, that's the best way for it to be. I don't know right now of any cases where we're not, I mean, the State Department is not a law enforcement entity, so we have to rely on the FBI, and then the FBI would have to go to federal prosecutors to initiate a case. I'm not aware that any cases are active right now. So, I mean, that isn't to say that there could be cases that are in the works. And so that is not something that I can really respond to.
If I could just be clear on that, Congressman, Assistant Secretary Jacobs has been very careful here. I think we would just simply say that we're not ruling anything out, and we have explored a lot of different options. And tomorrow in our private session, we'll be able to go over a little bit of this. But shall we say that we've looked at every case. We've also been involved in, shall we say, an education campaign. Some of the problems that we have, frankly, are local law enforcement who don't fully understand some of the circumstances, and working with various regional law enforcement entities and judicial entities. We have explored a variety of options. And we just want to underscore, and when in diplomacy, when you say you're not going to take something off the table, there's a very clear intent associated with that. And I just would like to stand by that, if I may.
Can I just ask you, when you talk about the violence issue, if a court of competent jurisdiction in the United States had an enforceable order and allegations of violence were not asserted, or if they were found to be infirm, does the court, or would they contemplate that in Japan they would take that all up like it's brand new ground, or would, like in keeping with the spirit of the 1996 convention, look to enforce each other's court orders? Because that is a major, otherwise it starts all over with a potentially false allegation of violence that has to be adjudicated all over again, and
exactly,
as we know from David Goldman's case, where there was no violence ever asserted, but they used the courts, or misused the courts, for 5.5 long years, and to the tune of $500,000 on his part.
The President signed the Protection of the Child Convention in October, and we are exploring, I mean, we're working very actively with the Uniform Law Commission to figure out what implementing legislation we will need. This convention would be a great complementary convention to the Abduction Convention because it calls for recognition of foreign custody orders. And if there were a custody order, then we could present that, and it would really eliminate so many problems.
That's a huge deal.
It would be done. And so that's something
that's
we're
our goal.
looking at.
That's our goal here.
Yes.
Can I also say, Congress, one other thing that we've tried to do? Then again, thank the parents. Sometimes they come up with the most creative ideas and suggestions. And so in the immediate aftermath of this, horrible tragedy, this, tsunami, nuclear challenge that Japan has faced, some of the parents contacted us and said, look, we're worried about the well-being of our family, of our children. And working closely with Consular Affairs, we made it so that every single one of those children could get a passport, American passport. So now, unfortunately, that was not taken advantage of. But we're going to look to take creative steps, both legal, procedurally, and the like. It is also the case, if I may say, and I want to be careful about this, we have in the last many months had a couple of other cases where we've made progress, where the particular parent has been reluctant to put too much attention on it for fear that there will be backtracking. And so I do think we are starting to get a critical mass both inside the Japanese government, certainly in the U.S. government. And if I can just conclude with this one thing, Congressman, I mean, the biggest surprise in my job, when I was in the Pentagon at a lower level 10 years ago, I had a lot of people that were interested in foreign policy and a lot of, issues. I don't see very much of that today. I see a lot of insular congressional focus, even on, and this is not just about American livelihoods, but it's also about how we interact with the world. I'd love to have more people like you and Congressman Payne focused on this, but I don't see as much as I would have anticipated.
Well, one way of doing that is reaching out to those members of Congress, House and Senate, when there's an abducted, really tell them how much value added that potentially could be. We would have more members here, I think, if they had someone in their district that all of a sudden it becomes very real and very personal to them. And if you could speak, because you didn't answer the question on that final question about the MOU.
Oh, yes, I will. I will say, honestly, Congressman, almost every hearing is like this. So I hope you're right, and I would like to see that, and I think we will take further steps. But I find that is the general issue. We have had some discussions. From the Japanese perspective, it's a complete non-starter. And the key here is the letter U, understanding. It requires a degree of partnership and engagement on the Japanese side. Their view is that we are addressing this according to your concerns. You've asked us to work on the issues associated with Hague. We've indicated that we need to see progress on existing cases. But on this particular issue, they're not prepared to go down this path. They said, look, we're better to focus on these other matters. And I think in many respects.
But again, Mrs. Secretary, too, and Dr. Campbell, what is our position? Is it our position to push for an MOU and a bilateral agreement?
If we could get an agreement with the Japanese government to return these children, we would have sought it years ago.
But are we pushing for that agreement at the highest levels? I know we pushed for Hague, and kudos for that. But again, the day they sign is a bittersweet day for the left-behind parents because by definition, they are excluded because it is all from date of entry into force onward, and the door closes behind them. Yeah, the idea is that the Japanese should say, all in. We're all in. We mean it. And it's a test of their sincerity, frankly.
I think we have always pursued two tracks, both of which are incredibly important. One was getting these children returned to the United States, and the other is Hague. And we're not going to give up on getting the children back to the United States. And we'll figure out a way to do it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Payne?
Could I, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize, but I've been in my committee, if you just give me 1 minute, Don. I have some questions I will submit in writing to Ambassador Jacobs because I can tell they're not going to be answered publicly. They have to do with law enforcement. I want to get to the issue of, in some cases, we have clear-cut violations of the law. Now, I understand you're not the FBI, but I'm going to submit some specific questions, both about extradition and about visa revocation for people who've been involved. But I would suggest, too, Mr. Chairman, I think probably this is a inter-committee thing, and I think it would probably be useful if this subcommittee, which has been the leader in this, would be to talk to our colleagues at Judiciary and have a joint confidential briefing of those of us who are interested. And let's pursue the case of extradition. Let's pursue the case of visa revocation. That is, I understand I'm not going to get public answers because I'm talking about some punitive actions against individuals. But I would be glad to participate. I'm sure our colleagues in Judiciary would, and we would ask for a private briefing so we would have no holds barred. And I would just want to put people on notice. I want to know who are you trying to extradite and why not, if not, and what about visas and what about other very specific sanctions. Mr. Chairman and Mr. Payne, thank you very much for accommodating me.
We would welcome that opportunity, sir.
Good, thank you very much. I know that there's a time constraint, understand the witnesses wanted to be out by 4, so I see that that's the case. I need to stop now. Right. But I'll be brief just in order for you to meet other commitments that you may have. I just might ask you, Ambassador Jacobs, as you note in your testimony, the Office of Children's Issues in the U.S. Central Authority for Incoming and Outgoing Applicants pursuant to the Hague Convention. In 2010, the State Department's Office of Children's Issues reported 1,495 international custody and access cases involving 2,123 children. Now, this is twice the number of cases reported in 2006. And if indeed we start to really circulate memorandums or dear colleagues asking members of Congress, do you have any concerns and issues, we would certainly assume that there would even be a quantum leap in the number of cases. So my question is, how is the budget, and as you may know, there are proposed cuts in this area, and do you have the ability to handle the number of cases now in this U.S. Central Authority, the Children's Issue Group, and with the expectation that there will indeed be a bump up just by virtue of there being more attention paid to this issue? We don't want to raise expectations and then you'd be unable to handle the load. I just wonder if you could deal with that for a moment, Ambassador.
Thank you for that question, sir. Because of the congressional limit on the number of cases that each officer can handle, we are able to hire to meet demand. The cases that are open are an accumulation from the last, these are all the open cases. The 1,491 children are the total cases that are still open over the years. Mm-hmm. And some of them, most of them are active, and we try to talk to the parents, call them, make sure that they are still interested in pursuing a return. But we always, if we had more money, we could do more training, we could do more outreach. I mean, there are a lot of good things that we could do with additional funding, as could the Permanent Bureau of The Hague. So we welcome your interest, and we will call on you to help us. Thank you, sir.
All right, just another quick question. We, although the United States, Ambassador Jacobs, criminalizes international parental child abductions, we know other countries do not, including several of the Asian Pacific region in that area. According to the State Department's Office of Children's Issues website, examples include Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Thailand. So I guess my question is, to what extent, in your opinion, is criminalization or criminalizing international parent-child abduction an important policy tool, and what are its merits and limitations as an effective means to prevent, combat, and punish international parental child abduction?
Thank you for that very difficult question. I think that I can understand why we have criminalized international child abduction. It is a crime. Other countries don't view it that way. In discussions, for example, that I had in India, I was told that it's impossible for a parent to abduct their child. And if countries would join the Hague, then we could work on civil remedies. We would be able to use diplomacy in order to get these children back. Having the criminal remedy on the table, I think, makes it difficult for some countries to cooperate with us. But that doesn't mean that we don't keep pushing them to do what they ought to do.
In that same regard, evidently there are certainly cultural differences around the world. I mean, it's understatement. In some cultures, evidently, the maternal part of of the view of the family, just in general, that it may be just that a mother is just the natural. If there's one parent, the natural move is for it to be the mother. They are more compassionate. Supposedly, they will do a better job. It's the culture in many instances, and so neither one of you can handle that. How much do you feel that there are just honest beliefs that their culture, I mean, I'm not talking about criminality or anything, but just a normal divorce case, so to speak, in India or Malaysia, the culture would, do you think, have a way of creeping into the decisions, even if it's not intentional, but it's just a matter of the culture?
Thank you for that. I do think it's cultural, and I suggest to people that they watch Kramer versus Kramer, which shows that a father can be a loving, caring parent and can do just as good a job raising a child as a mother can.
And we find that even here in the United States, to be truthful, in parental custody cases, you've almost got to be a Lady Simon agree to not get the custody in a lot of instances. So.
No, unfortunately, I think there is that bias, and it still exists in many countries. In the Middle East, it's assumed that the mother will raise the child until a certain age, and then the custody goes to the father, and that can be another difficulty. But there are biases, and that's why we like the Hague, because it eliminates gender bias, and it's based on habitual residence of the child. And it eliminates a lot of those issues.
Can I just, two things, Congressman, these are excellent questions. The first, on the issue of the legal status associated with child abduction. And I think Ambassador Jacobs is clear that sometimes in certain circumstances that it's created some challenges with other countries. But it is also the case that almost all countries have specific jurisdictional issues and assignments associated with kidnapping. And it is those set of issues on which we believe that we can make substantial progress. That would be the first point. The second is that would that it be just maternal issues? In truth, in many societies, it goes even further than that. There are both maternal issues and there are also ethnic issues that come to play, sometimes that overcome maternal issues. And so these are very complicated, very deep-seated, and hard to tease out and also hard to confront sometimes. And to be perfectly honest, as the ambassador indicates, there are many aspects of Hague that you'd say, well, imperfect. But overall, it's a remarkably effective tool to address an issue that is going to grow in magnitude because the number of cross-national marriages has increased dramatically in the last decade and will again in the next decade.
Well, thank you very much. I think that it is important that we support international organizations like this, and I think that the Hague is the type that we would agree, although we're seeing somewhat of a growing move on some political philosophies that we withdraw from international groups. And so I think that if that trend tends to continue, we're going to find ourselves at a disadvantage when things like the Hague and other, and in my opinion, most international organizations tend to do much more good than some of the times when they're not as effective as we would like them to be. So because of your time, I'll yield back, and Chairman may have some other questions. Thank you.
Just a few follow-ups. Thank you very much, Mr. Payne, for your questions. If I could ask a couple of final questions, and I know you do have to leave, and I thank you for your patience. Left Behind parents have received conflicting reports as to whether their specific cases have been raised by name with Japan. One Left Behind parent received a response to his inquiry that states the following, and I'll just quote it. It's from an email, and we have the email. The State Department has not formally demanded the return of any abducted children. As you know, one of the challenges inherent in resolving parental child abduction cases is overcoming the differences in law between sovereign nations. The policy of the United States government is to use bilateral relations to press for ratification of or compliance to the Hague Convention, and for non-Hague countries, such as Japan, to assist left-behind parents in obtaining access or return of their children. Is this email accurate? Do we raise specific cases with the Japanese, and do we then report to the left-behind parent as to what it is that was gleaned from those conversations?
Yes, sir, we do. We do raise individual cases with the permission of the parents, and then we report back to them on
Is
what
that
we've
uniform with each parent, or is it on
learned. It's up to the parent. I think some of the parents have asked us not to raise their individual cases.
So everyone who wants their case raised by name with the Japanese government, and who are your interlocutors?
I mean,
Yes,
I'm not a
Dr. Campbell.
consular official, but I've
Right.
been in many meetings where cases have been made directly at very high levels. And so it's very hard. I don't know who that email's from. I don't know what it's referring to. All I can tell you is I have sat watching either our ambassador in Japan or a consular official go through the particulars of a particular case, not with a legal person, but a higher level political person in Japan, in order to make an important point that these are not just faceless people, just statistics, that we have real people behind these cases.
Well,
who want answers.
the person at OCI is Courtney Hauk, and I'm not sure what she means by has not formally demanded the return of any abducted children.
I don't know. I can't.
We'll find out, and we will get back
I
to
don't know
you,
what
sir.
that means, but
We'll get back to you on that.
Okay. Let me, if I could, in your testimony, you point out 123 active abductions involving 173 children. That's 17 more children than just 2.5 months ago. Is that because more children have been abducted, or new cases have just come into the office, or what? How do you?
I think I can answer that. But one of the things that I think we found generally when we started looking at these cases is that the database was not uniform. A lot of cases had sort of fallen off. And so Janice's organization, Consular Affairs, all of our people in Tokyo have made a concerted effort to contact every single person we can and try to figure out what are the active cases. It is my belief that those cases reflect a greater precision of what the nature of the existing pool is, not new cases in the last 3 months. It is also the case that there are some families, some separated families that were not aware of, some organizations not aware, and because of publicity, again, a good thing, that they have joined in this overall effort. So I think that is the primary. I don't believe there's been any new cases of note over the course of the last 3 or 4 months, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Just 2 final questions. Michael Elias's ex-wife has denied any welfare and whereabouts visits with the children. In that case or in any other like it, what do we do next? I mean, he doesn't even know if his children are okay.
I totally understand. I completely understand. I mean, there are several. I mean, a very difficult case like this, Congressman. The truth is, you have to work on many fronts. The first front is, again, try to establish the larger overarching legal framework, which is the Hague, to establish the framework, and then work on the corresponding implementing language. We press Japanese authorities who are in touch with various taking parents to very assertively make the case about, okay. Yes, can I just tell you, I'm just been informed, and I apologize for this, that the nuclear crisis did cause some left-behind parents to get back in touch, and we reopened some of those cases. So that, I think I think is what I was trying to say in terms of these are cases that have already been, that have been in the works or have been around for many, many years, but they are reopened because of the nuclear case. But I don't think there's been anything new, not a new abduction, yes. So, sorry.
Were the children minors throughout? Why weren't they?
I don't know that.
Okay.
I don't know the nature, but I didn't want to give you inaccurate information on that. So let me just say that it is also the case that we find that many of the taking parents have legal counsel in Japan. There are a group of lawyers that specialize in Japanese law, what their rights are and how to use aspects of Japanese law. Almost all of the most difficult cases we have found, or many of them, involve legal advice that, while is technically accurate within the Japanese context, is frankly extraordinarily unhelpful. And we have also asked Japanese authorities to look carefully at some of these activities as a whole. The truth is, Congressman, cases like this are just a tragedy, and we are applying, I think we're trying to make clear to you, we're trying to apply every possible tool, including some legal issues. Now, the truth is, we've made clear to Japanese colleagues and friends that we're going to look carefully at all avenues, and that they need to understand the urgency, and that outrage is growing on Capitol Hill. Indignation, not just among the parents, but a much broader group of the American people and the electorate and in the executive branch. And they have a chance to do this under the right conditions, right? In the spirit of partnership, of the humanity, of a strong bilateral relationship. But ultimately, I come down where Congressman Frank indicates, that in a case where the clear-cut needs of American families come to play, then we're going to have to take a very hard look. And I must say, I am not ashamed about the steps that we have taken in support of the Japanese abductees. But I think our parents have a right to say, look, let's expect the same thing in return. And we make that point in almost all of our meetings. Very different circumstances, obviously, but we want the same compassion and commitment from Japanese colleagues.
I'll just conclude with this and throw it out to you one more time on the bilateral agreement as to whether or not you would consider establishing a special court that would adjudicate these cases. I mean, this is a festering sore that will only grow, and I hope the Japanese government understands it. I mean, we are close friends and allies, but this is a human rights abuse against American children and American left-behind parents. I will continue to push hard for the H.R. 1940, and it's a matter of when and not if that I believe we will get that enacted. And I say that because there needs to be a penalty phase. Friends don't let friends commit human rights abuses, well, whether it be human trafficking, religious freedom, or any other abuse. This is, as the Hague Convention and its genesis shows clearly, parental abduction is child abuse. It hurts the child more than anyone else, injures the left-behind parents, but it hurts the child. And I know you know that, and I know you know that well. But I do believe there needs to be a penalty phase at some point for a country, ally or not, that continues its obstinacy with regards to this. So I would ask you to I'm not sure who has made the decision to accept no as no, but if the Secretary of State, if President Obama, if you, who deal with this issue every day, could work it to try to turn that no to a yes for a bilateral agreement. Otherwise, I have a sense of fright, and I talk to, like you, to the left-behind parents. They sense that when that door closes, it will not create an atmosphere that will resolve the older cases. They will be grandfathered in as older cases, cold cases that don't get resolved. There may be an exception somewhere, but I think human nature being what it is, time and delay is denial. Those children will grow. They will be, they will be 21, 30, who knows what it will be. They'll get to see mom or dad then. But these are these years that are irreplaceable. So I ask you, please, push for that bilateral agreement, special court, call it whatever you want, or whatever modality you choose, but there needs to be a process and an agreement between our two countries. And otherwise, there needs to be a penalty phase, and because they're getting away with abduction. So if you want to respond to that, or...
I don't think the door is ever closed to trying to reach an agreement on this. I think there are a number of ways that we can try to do it. One of them is in changes in Japanese domestic law that they will need to make anyhow in order to ratify the convention, and we can encourage them to include the older cases in this ratification.
But again, I would hope that President Obama would talk to the Prime Minister and say, solving these cases, and it will take, I think, a mechanism. It won't happen just by saying the wave of the arm or the wand. So make that, his major talking point in his next meeting.
Let me just say we've had great success in Secretary Clinton has made this a major issue in her various meetings with the Japanese foreign minister, and we do agree that this has to be an issue that is raised at the highest level in our government. It is also the case, frankly, that we underscore to Japan what a success story looks like. And the most recent one was really in the Clinton administration. We had a huge problem with Germany. Lots of pressure. President Clinton worked with the German government. We now have a much, much better situation. And I will underscore that many of those pre-existing cases were dealt with. And so we understand, I don't know how else to say this, Congressman, that it's not enough just to work on going forward. It has to be, it has to involve the existing. When you say pre-existing cases, it sounds so antiseptic. The ongoing crisis and the enormous challenge that these families are facing right now. And we expect that those issues will be dealt with. I don't know how else to say it. Right. And frankly, every single possible thing we're doing right now, we are doing, at least at my lowly level, I am doing.
And as you know so well, every day of continued unlawful retention is another day of abuse. Mr. Payne.
Just a quick closing comment. We've heard, and you talked about the great success, the breakthrough finally in Germany. We're at loggerheads here in Japan, so evidently the countries where we have the largest number of these cases are countries where we've had military installations and marriages between U.S. GIs and the current population. Since we are having a 10-year war in Iraq and in no less than that in Afghanistan, I just wonder whether is the nature of these rotations and wars and the manner in which the war is conducted today different, and therefore we don't necessarily have to anticipate that 2 or 3 years from now we're going to see 2 additional countries where we're starting to come up with a lot of clashes and loggerheads. How is the current conflicts we find ourselves in your opinion, leading to the situation, or whether because of the difference in the manner in which war is waged, we may not have the same problem?
Yeah. First of all, just 2 things, Congressman Payne. In truth, most of the abductions are to Canada and Mexico, just as a starting point. And secondly, the nature of the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan are such that there is not the kind of off-time fraternization, mingling that we see in circumstances where you're at peace but living, you know, in another country and out on the economy. So I don't anticipate this problem in many places for a variety of reasons in the Middle East. Okay.
Thank you. I want to thank our distinguished witnesses, Dr. Campbell and Ambassador Jacobs, for your testimony. Look forward to working with you going forward. I do ask unanimous consent that members of the subcommittee have 5 days to revise and extend their remarks and submit, and we will submit some additional questions. Mr. Payne might have some additional ones as well on a number of other countries that we have concerns about. So I thank you, and this hearing is adjourned.